You lose 40 grand on your first flip. Like, it's a disaster from Tony all the way through to the end. I can't believe that about the appraiser. And then you had the balls, and your dad and your mom had the balls to do it again. What's going on, everybody? This is Chris Naugle, and welcome back to the show. So I've got a friend of mine on today, but a friend of mine that has walked the same path, or maybe I actually walked his path because he created it with his dad. And his name is Bob McIntosh. You might have heard of him. 3 Degree Consulting is the company that he's got today, but he's had lots of companies, lots of experiences. And what we're going to talk about on today's podcast is not all the good stuff, not all the money and the mansions and the Ferraris. We're going to talk about failing. We're going to talk about building inspectors helping you fail faster. We're going to talk about money problems. We're going to talk about the things that nobody else wants to talk about because they feel it makes them seem weak. Well, you know what? Sometimes in life, you got to fail, and you got to fail fast, and you got to learn from it so you can move on. And that's what I think Bob and I share a very common story on. Not only that, Bob and I were business partners. So we're going to get into that business, how it went and everything. So folks, stay tuned. This is going to be really exciting. And I also want to preface, what you take out of this podcast should not just be a laugh or two. It should not just be knowledge. It should be something that you can learn from and apply in your life. I bet you any money, someone that listens to this podcast is going through a hard time right now, having a little bit of struggles with cash flow or money. And they're thinking, oh, no, I don't want to talk about that. Well, that's what we're going to talk about, because you got to fail sometimes and you got to get that out of the way. And that's how we're going to go. So, Bob, what's going on, man?
Awesome, man. That's quite the intro, and all absolutely true. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you all for your time, for listening. Obviously, it's the most important thing you can do. So we'll make sure that we make the best use of it.
Awesome. Well, real quick, let's just go into your background. I remember growing up, we grew up in the same town, and there was this car place, that I drove by all the time. And it was really cool. It was like antique car parts. And I never knew who the owner was. I knew it was a very successful business. And lo and behold, it was Bob's dad. But, Bob's dad ran this successful business. His name's Robert. So it's very close to Bob. And transitioned and took the money from the business and started investing in real estate, then started coaching in real estate, which, Bob, I believe that's some of your origins, right? Like, did you used to work in that car place, the car parts store?
Oh yeah. I called myself the floater. I did all the things that no one else wanted to do or could do. It was usually like this is how I describe it. It's like it was this old metal building, right? And it had a metal roof, and there was a fiberglass sunroof, right? That would let light into the warehouse, and the heat would always leak out from the sides and melt, and it would warm the metal up. So it would melt the snow in the wintertime until it formed a water, and then it would slide down and it would become ice again because it's on metal, right? So it would hit there. And so it was, well, we got to have someone go up on the roof and chip away all the ice, but all we have is a hoe, in the ground. It's like metal roof, ice. Who can we send up? We'll send Bob. No big deal. It'll be fine. If he falls, he's family. So that was my high school job. And look, like, hey, I learned a lot for sure. Learned a lot of things from that job, and but it was also cool to be able to say, hey, like, kind of watch my dad build something up. I don't think I really understood for a long time what that meant until later on. But it was definitely cool to do that. But it was also interesting. You get, vis-a-vis being family, you kind of get that behind the scenes, right? Like even though I wasn't necessarily in the meetings about everything, you still hear it. It's being discussed at home. It's always, as entrepreneurs, these things integrate into all parts of our lives. And so it was always interesting to kind of be around those combos. And I don't think I truly appreciated that until really kicking off my own businesses and kind of figuring it out from there. Yeah,
that's interesting. And I can't believe they sent you up on the roof. Like,
oh yeah, dude, I did all the things.
All the things. If you fell, you're not going to sue, so maybe that was it. That's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, it's family. It's fine. Yeah. No, this is OSHA's not looking. It's okay. He's not going to report us.
This business was a staple, not just, in our town, but it was a nationwide staple for anybody that, was putting together an old car, like a Model T or, probably every car. I remember the catalogs were like phone books, it just had so many different parts.
Fords from the 1909s to the 1970s. It was like about as niche as you can probably get into a business.
Wow. but it was successful. Now he ended up selling that, correct?
Yep, sold it in 2003 for a decent chunk of change. And, I think if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong on this, but I think the business was doing about 16, 17 million a year in revenue at that point. So, 50-ish employees around there. So, sizable business for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, let's kind of transition that into, your dad and because you guys did this together, journey into real estate. Like, when did real estate enter the family and why?
Yeah. So in two places, my dad had always kind of been in real estate a little bit. His dad and grandpa, prior to starting the auto parts store, actually ran a surveying firm. And if you're actually, that whole neighborhood back behind there that had like Macintosh Street and all that on it, that was developed by my grandpa and his brother way back in the day.
It's a huge development now.
Yeah, it is. So we kind of had some experience there, but we didn't kind of pursue it. Like I wasn't ever involved in that. That was before I was even born. But what ended up happening was for me, I got to go to school and I had a little bit of money left over from school, about 10 grand. And I was trying to figure out what the heck to do with it. And, some people are telling me, oh, like go on a trip, go to backpack in Europe, go, blow it on this, buy a new car. And I was like, no, like I want to do something with it. Like not just buy something, but I want to invest it somehow. But I didn't know what to do. And I was like, I know the stock market's there, but I wasn't really excited by that. And so I ended up reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and good book for foundational stuff. But what it changed my mindset on is like real estate as an investment. I'd never thought about it as an investment vehicle before, right? Like it just never had occurred to me to think about it that way. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so I started talking to my dad, and lo and behold, our neighbor, who was a developer, owned this little duplex across from North Park, and which is a middle school in our city. And
that's where I went.
He was like, yep. And he was like, hey, like I got this duplex for sale. It's $100,000. Do you want to buy it? And now, so mind you, this is 2008. So, you could still, things were a lot different then, but I was like, yeah, I had a job at that point. So I used my job, my W-2 income to get a normal loan. I put 10% down because that's what was required at that point in time. You could get away with that. So my $10,000 I had left from college went into a property. I was like, great. It was like a couple $100 a month. It wasn't anything crazy, but it was like, all right, but it's making money on me. And I was like, well, this is interesting. If I had like, 10 or 20 or 30 of these, like that would be a whole different story. But then I started thinking of like, well, I got to keep, finding 10 grand. How am I going to do that? How am I going to make that happen? And so that led us to flipping, which I bought our first house outside of New York City because that's where I was living. And it was a complete and utter mitigated disaster from there. So yeah, that's how we got started.
Wow. I didn't know that about the first flip being in outside New York City. And boy, I know that area over there by North Park quite well. But I do want to kind of just talk about one thing there. And I want to ask the audience. So anyone that's listening to this, how many of you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that was your start into real estate? Bob, like, isn't it crazy? Like how impactful that one book is in the real estate realm?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like I know a ton of people that have read that book. And even if they didn't read it as a starting point, they read it at some point in time.
And then I got to ask, why is Robert Kiyosaki such an angry man nowadays? But that's a topic for a whole
for another day, right?
Day. So let's transition a little bit. So you started flipping houses. Now you did the first one over there. Was it a success or was it a failure?
A total failure. Lost a lot of money. We did everything wrong. Now, mind you, I do want to quantify because today it's so different in this space than it was back then. So this is 2000. I think it was late 8 or early 9 is when we bought this thing, somewhere right around there. And first of all, there wasn't really education programs like there are now. Podcasts didn't exist. Like, mind you, this is like iPhone 1 times, right? Like I think iPhone or maybe 2. So it's just a very different in that, like the education. There was books. And I'd read a bunch of books and was like, okay, like I'm a 20-something-year-old. I'm like a little cocky guy. I'm like, yeah, I can do this. Like, this is easy. So I find myself an agent who was like investor friendly, supposedly. And he got me a property and I was like, okay, this is great. Now I was like, I don't have the money, obviously, to buy the property. And I didn't know about private money, like there was no private money club out there to go find money at that point in time. So I got a loan, 203K loan from Wells Fargo. It was the worst, most, oh my God, like it took 7 months for us to close this property. That's how long it took. I don't know why, but now mind you, this is like, well, everything's failing at this point. So they're just slammed with like properties failing. I was buying a foreclosure and it was a disaster. But I got this 203K loan, and I made the mistake of assuming that because I got a 203K loan, you're required to use approved contractors by your bank. So I assumed that if they were approved contractors, they must be good contractors, because why would the bank approve people who weren't? They were not. I got Tony, and I challenge anyone's bad contractor story to Tony. Tony put on brass door handles on one side of a door and brushed knobs on one side and brushed nickel handles on the other side, and then tried to tell me he bought them at Home Depot that way. Tony tore down an old chimney that was in the kitchen that you used to cook on, and then didn't frame up the chimney, so it started tipping over and almost went through the old lady's house next door, because it was like a row house right next door, almost like bricks flying through a window. Tony bought a fun noodle from Walmart, like one for the pool, and that's what he used for pipe insulation. And then on an outside wall, and then the pipe froze again, and he couldn't figure out why. And I was like, that's just the beginning of the stories of Tony. So anyways, yeah, we did everything wrong. And then we learned probably the biggest lesson out of that house was this was a very inexpensive house. At the time, we sold it, I think, for $260 or $270, and it was 6 miles outside of Manhattan, right? Which is kind of crazy now. You wouldn't be able to, that's probably an $800,000 house today. But it was all FHA buyers. That was the only people buying in that neighborhood. It was all new first-time home buyers, all FHA. And we got this guy who did an appraisal. And of course, if you're not familiar with this, you will be soon if you ever do FHA, but you have to get 2 appraisals, and they take the lowest of the 2 appraisals. And that's the valuation they give the house for on the loan that they're going to give to your buyer. Well, the appraiser mismeasured the house by 500 square feet. Now, had that been included, the price would have been right on point with what my agent told me and what the offer that we had accepted was at. So that was good. And where the first appraisal came in. And I'm like, how did this come in so low? So I got a copy of it. I'm looking through. I was like, yeah, he just left off 500 square feet of the house, which was like, what the heck? So I call him and it's like, hey man, like you effed up, like you got to fix this. And he looks and he goes, oh yeah, man, I did. But no, I can't tell the bank that I did, because if I do, then they won't hire me for appraisals anymore. And I need this job, because this is, now mind you, during the Great Recession. So things are bad. He's like, I need this job. So he refused to fix the appraisal.
You couldn't sue him? Like that's gotta be something you could sue for. You would
think so. And I probably could have, but the reality was, like, at this point in time, I'm like, okay. And here's what I didn't know. I was like, fine. So we just bailed on the buyer, and I said, I'll just get another buyer, right? Like there's still buyers out there. The price was good. Like we had accounted for the market and all of that. What I didn't account for, and I didn't know because I was new and inexperienced, was that FHA appraisals stick with the house for 6 months. So that terrible appraisal stuck there for 6 months. So I had to market only to non-FHA buyers, which was a way smaller pool at that point in time, especially in that area. And then my holding cost basically ate me alive. And at the end of the day, had I sold it to them, to the original buyer, for the price of the messed up appraisal, I still would have made probably about 10 grand. Not great, but hey, would have made money. Instead, because I had to hold it for 6, and then we could remarket it to FHA. Then it took another 3 for us to get another buyer. My holding costs ate me alive. And then at that point, a few other things had kind of gone wrong that we didn't account for. And so, yeah, by the end of the day, I think we lost like 40 grand or something like that. It was just an unmitigated disaster on our part. And of course, I have no money, right? I'm a college kid, or just out of college kid. So whose money was that? That was dad's money and mom's money. And yeah, for some reason we said, hey, we're going to come back and keep doing some more.
Well, that's what I want to know. Like, you lose 40 grand on your first flip. Like, it's a disaster from Tony all the way through to the end. I can't believe that about the appraiser. And then you had the balls, and your dad and your mom had the balls to do it again.
Well, so here's the thing, and this is what no one talks about, in my opinion, about loss, especially in the real estate space, right? So I'm looking at it going, okay, I've got a job right now, and I was making about, I don't know, probably at that point, 75,000 a year, right? So it's good money, right?
For that time,
yeah, like that's even today, that would be, decent, but but the reality is like, if I got to pay them back 40 grand, it's going to take me a decade to save that much, or I'm gonna have to live like a total like vagabond basically, and like scrimp by and ramen noodle diet for the next 5 years to try to get them paid back. And so you look at a certain point and you say, okay, well, I took it on the chin in this one for sure, but the best and fastest and easiest way to pay them back is to do another deal and make it work. Like take all the lessons that I learned about what I did wrong and say, okay, let's figure that out. And so we did. We found another house. Actually, it's funny. The developer who sold me the first rental that we had, which by the way I still own to this day. It's one of our best from a consistency standpoint, from a cash flow consistency. But his sister is Kathy DeMillo, who you might know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like she's huge in the agent space. So he had kind of, I guess, told her that we were like going to be flipping houses. And so she reached out and she said, hey, I have this house in Northview Gardens. And by the way, for most of you, you have no idea what we're talking about, but I know Chris does. So we have this like house in Northview Gardens. It's a total fire damage. Like the thing is it's in bad shape. I can't sell it. No one wants to buy it. Mind you, this is, I think 2009 now. It's like no one wants to buy a fire damaged house. And you would need a 203K loan to do it if you're going to get like a regular buyer. It's just, she's like, are you guys interested? We're like, sure, let's check it out. So we checked it out, got our bids in, did all the things you're supposed to do that we had kind of learned along the way. And that house ended up being a great one. I think we made not a huge amount of money. I think we made about 25,000. But it was on $100,000 total. I think we put a total of like 98,000 into the house. And we made 25. And I was like, okay.
So that included purchase price?
Yeah. We bought the house for 12 grand. 15 grand, something. I mean, it was bad. I mean, it was nothing. We had to gut the whole.
I did one fire. I did one.
Yeah.
And it would be the
that
last
neighborhood,
one.
right? Like it was like those split level houses. The whole main level of the house was basically gone. So we just had to redo that whole thing. So, but yeah, it was okay. I lied. Sorry. We sold that one. I was thinking, no, we sold that one for like 102, I think. And we were into it for like 75 ish, all said and done. And we hired like a fire damage specialist company, and they actually did a great job. Like they knew their jam, they knew how to fix everything. They were very expensive. Like I paid way more. Like if we had done it ourselves, like GC did it ourselves, we probably could have done it for about 2/3 of the cost. But hey, you live and you learn. But we kind of figured out, okay, that kind of got the thing going, and then we kind of just made it from there, and more deals to get that money paid back. And I think that's the thing that sometimes people do is like, hey, you can take a loss, but don't give up. And like for me, the reality of giving up and then having to face trying to figure out how to make that with a normal job would have been, it just would have been miserable.
I think that was really smart of you. And, after you said that, I'm like, yeah, I would have done the same thing. It's kind of, I don't gamble, but it's kind of like, you have a losing hand, then you just go and you put it all on black and you hit black and you're like, all right, cool. I'm back in the game. You did that and you did it with a fire home. I want to almost do a disclaimer here, folks. Like if you're new and you're just getting started in real estate and flipping, do not do a fire burn or water damaged house as one of your first. And if you do what Bob just said, hire a professional that knows exactly how to do that. Because I didn't. I did one. It was a complete burnout and we bought it 12 grand. It's ironic that you paid 12 grand and I paid 12 grand. I did this in 2014, I think, or 15. I did our fire burn. I gutted the whole thing myself, got really sick. I mean, I thought, hey, you just put a bandana over your face. I got really sick. Me and my best friend, Mike, at that time, were doing a couple, I think this was like my third or fourth flip. And we did it all ourselves. It took the better part of a year. It seemed like it was never going to be done. Building inspectors were crawling all over us about every single thing. We hired a couple Tonys, fired a couple Tonys. But we got it done, and it's kind of funny. We actually made money on a fire burnout too. Ironic that happens. But so after you got the fire burn one, like what was the trajectory next? Because how many total flips have you and your dad done combined?
Hundreds. I've forgotten. I don't know the exact number, but it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, and because I know when I got into it, you guys were well on your way. You guys were with Fortune Builders doing the coaching, but you were also doing tons of flips. And, we crossed paths on a few, but like, did it ever get easier?
It did actually. So it got easier, then it got harder. Then it got really hard. So different time, right? Like when we picked up, there wasn't really especially in Lockport, but really in Buffalo in general, there wasn't a ton of people flipping houses. And if
No.
there was, it was a lot of people. It was like, it was contractor Joe who knows how to do all the work himself. And he might own it for 2 or 3 or 4 years and make, 15 or 20 grand over that time. And he's okay with that because he's doing all the work himself. Right. So there wasn't a ton. So we actually, like, our initial trajectory was all agents. We got a lot of deals from agents because we bought that one from her. And then she was like, we kind of became known as the fire damage people because we did such a good job with that first one. And by the way, if you're going to do a fire damage, like if you're thinking about it or you're bidding on one, if you don't know anything, get the bids from a fire damage specialist, like a restoration company. I will say I learned more from them about why they were doing things so that I could go do it myself next time. There's not anything necessarily hard about what they do. It's just knowing which things to do and why you need to do those things. And once you know those, you can kind of replicate the process yourself, usually for a lot less a lot less money. But anyways, we kind of became known as that. So we did a bunch of fire damaged houses after that because we kind of had the system down. But it put us on the map. And one of the things I think that I attribute, well, two things that I attribute to our growth, especially during that time. Number one was I did the no BS offer. And what I mean by that is, and people do this all the time now, I see it constantly, is I give you my price, that is my price. I'm not going to come back with an inspection later on and change the price. I said the only time I change my price is if for some reason we need to have an inspection on foundation or structural issues, and I don't know those because they can, like, something can look really bad but not be, or vice versa, and you have no idea. But we always said this is our price. I said what's going to happen is this: you're going to get another offer from other people. They're going to give you a higher price. You're going to think great. Then they're going to go through and do an inspection, and they're going to come back and nickel dime you, and you're going to end up wasting more time and end up at the same price. I said, I promise you, I was like, that will happen. And every single time what would happen that we got a house that we got is, yep, they did that. And then they would, like, I pre-framed them to get angry that the person did this to them. And so then they would cancel the offer with the other person. They would come back to us. And it worked. But what it ended up happening was, because we dealt with a lot of agents early on, was we became like, hey, we're the people, like, we will close. We're not going to nickel dime you. We're not going to go through this. Like, we will close. To this date, we have a 100% close ratio on every offer that we've put out there. Because I know my numbers, I know what to do, I know where I'm going. And sure, there's some I'm like, man, we should offer less. But it happens. But I think that determination, and then understand that in this game of real estate, especially, two things become true: relationships and money. We had the ability to raise funds and find money, which is great. And again, this is before tools. It's so much easier now with like PMC and things of that nature. But even back then, we were raising money, and we built a relationship. And by the way, those relationships both for agents as well as with lenders on the money side. But I think the reality is, if you focus on those things and you do well there, everything else falls into place. It may take a little time. Like, this didn't, by the way, we did one house like that. We did Kearney, which took us like a year and a half to do because it was just, like I said, a disaster. And then we did that fire damage house, and that took us like 7 months or 8 months, I think. It was fairly quick for it. And obviously we had a restoration company. And then we did, so that was like our second house. And then the next year, I think we did like 2 or 3 houses. And then it kind of ramped up from there, right? Like, it wasn't like all of a sudden I did one and all of a sudden now we're doing 100. It's like, it builds up over time, but those relationships multiply and grow exponentially the more that you're there. And I would challenge anyone, even to this day, to find someone who knows who my dad and I are in this space and have anything negative to say about our business and what we do. There might be one person I know exactly who they are because they're suing us, but outside of them, everything's good.
Your real estate business lives and dies by the network and the connections that you make. I mean, after all, your network, well, it's your net worth. That's what you always heard, right? If that's an area where you desire improvement, well, Private Money Club, it's for you. PMC saves you precious time and money by bringing the real estate world, well, right to you, right in the palm of your hand. So get in on the action, like so many others have, by going to privatemoneyclub.com and sign up.
Let me stop with that, because a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh, listen, folks, I want to be very open and honest about something. If you're going to get in real estate and you think you're not going to get sued, you are joking yourself, because if you get into real estate, I don't care if you're flipping or buying rentals, you will get sued. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of just when. I promise you, both Bob and I and my wife have been sued, and it's always the dumbest things. I mean, the most stupid things. I'm not even going to waste time with this. I just want to preface that, don't be scared of that. People are always going to try to take, Bob and his dad got a name, they were successful. Me and Larissa, after we had the show, we were successful, and everybody comes after you for that. They want to try to take what you've earned. And, it's just going to happen. Talk to any successful real estate investor, and that's exactly what you're going to find. But do you want to say anything on that?
No. And by the way, I do want to preface this though, right? Like you will, there eventually something will happen. Someone will happen. It's just a fact, right? But if you focus on doing the right things, if you focus on executing your business in the right way, you dramatically reduce the risk of that happening. You don't eliminate it. You can't eliminate it, but you can dramatically reduce it. Thankfully for us, this is the one and only time we have been, so, I can't say that it won't be the last, I'm sure, but we focus on doing the right things. And if you do that, usually you're going to have a better success ratio.
Yeah, boy, I wish I could say that was the only one. I had a contractor that worked for he worked for a contractor. He was just an employee, fell off scaffolding, sued me for the ladder law. Like nothing we did wrong. It just is the nature of the beast. And in New York, you can't beat the ladder law. Luckily, we had insurance. We had another one that we sold a house, and then they decided to rip the whole house apart. And then they decided to tear the house down and build a new one. And they sued us saying, you sold us a bad house. Now, I don't know if you just heard that, but they tore the house down. And they built a brand new build, but then they sued us for selling them a house that had issues, which it really didn't. And they did their own home inspection. We fixed all the stuff. So it's just a silly world out there, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. I really want to transition to where, you were ramping up. The one thing that I know is as we did the same transition as we started ramping up, we started figuring out the private money, and we started figuring out the relationship piece. And what ended up happening for us, and I don't know whether it was good or bad looking back, is you end up having more money than you can actually place into houses. So then what you start doing is you start really getting aggressive with acquisitions and finding deals. And I don't know, your judgment just seems to get blurred. You think you're following all the rules and all the things you're doing, but for some reason, you got this lender, they want to, do a deal with you. They've got the money and you're worried about that money drying up. So you go out and you find a deal and you go through and you do your numbers just like you always have. But for some reason, when you're in the deal, you made some mistakes. So is that what happened to you? I know you guys were doing, 5, 6 at a time, maybe even 10 at a time. We were up to doing over 20 a month is what we were doing at the peak. And that's when things really started to, kind of get difficult. And I'm not going to say fall apart, but started really kind of seeing the cracks in the foundation, not literally, but that's where our business stressed. Is that what happened to you?
Yeah, sort of. I would say, yes and no. A couple things. One, right? So you start having all this money and you can get loose with your risk tolerance, I guess I'd say. It was probably the best way to put it, right?
Yeah.
It's you kind of get cocky, oh yeah, I've got the guys, I got the team, I got the people, we can make this happen. We can go do this. We can make that happen or this or whatever, right? And so I think that's part of it. I think that's number one. Number two for us, this is what we started finding, and this is kind of where our wheels fell off a little bit, is when we started, almost all of our deals were easy. Paint, carpet, flooring, maybe some landscape, basic stuff, right? And we could be in and out of a house, usually in 6 months or less, which for some of you might go, wow, that seems like a long time. But, Buffalo, we're talking usually 45 to 60 days to close a house. So from opening till closing, you got to factor in an extra couple months there. But as we went on and more folks started getting into the market of flipping and all that, we started losing more of those deals to other people. And then I think a lot of contractors started getting into the game and just doing it themselves. And I can't really compete against a guy who's willing to spend 90 cents on the dollar because 10 cents is okay because he's doing his labor for free. And so we got bigger and bigger rehabs. And then as you get these bigger and bigger ones, you start opening walls, you find things, or you get into problems that you wouldn't have gotten into that might have existed in a house, but you didn't see them. So you didn't need to fix them necessarily. They weren't apparent until you opened a wall. And so I think that started happening. And then we had a ton of issues with contractors. It was impossible to find someone who is consistently good over time. Even if we offered to pay them more, it just seemed like you couldn't find someone to keep up, or they would be able to take on a certain capacity of houses, but there was never, we couldn't get past that. And then you try to bring in someone else, and then they would get butthurt because you're like, well, I wanted that house. Okay, well, you can't barely keep up with what you got. How are you going to do another one, right? So those kinds of issues, and we had a lot there. And then, as we went on, the biggest thing, and this is kind of a big reason why I came back to Buffalo for a bit, was, we started making, every house started taking longer and longer to fix. We were making less and less money per house. And at a certain point, we had to go, this doesn't make sense anymore. Like, yes, we're profitable, but at what expense and what risk ratio and risk tolerance? I think at one point, we're talking, we had probably $7 or $8 million placed into properties. And that, when you're looking at it going, man, my margins are dropping down to, sub 10% on a deal, you start sweating, if one thing goes wrong, one thing I didn't account for, one whatever, and all of a sudden that deal goes, flatline or negative. And then, it's like, man, and then it may not seem bad with one deal, but then you multiply that times, $6+ million, and you start thinking, well, if all these go bad, and the stories get into your head a little bit, but I think for us, that was sort of the final straw of, hey, like, even if we are profitable at this, the profit that we're making is just not worth it. Like, we're not trying to be the Walmart of house flippers. Like, that's just not my jam. I'd rather do less houses of higher quality and make bigger profit than the other way around. And it's easier for a million other reasons too to do that. But, it brings its own risks for sure.
Yeah. The contractors are especially, I can't even imagine. I mean, we do a couple houses still. I try to do none. My wife wants to dabble in design. Finding contractors today is even harder than it was back when, in this era, when we're talking, we'll say, my first flip was 06, yours was in that 2008 range. And we went hard straight up to probably 2018, 2019. And I know our trajectory was very similar to yours, but we both had major issues, not just with contractors, but also with building inspectors. And there's this one building inspector, I'll leave his name out of this, that he just had it out for flippers. And it just so happened to be that this building inspector was in one of the best areas that you could flip houses, like the creme de la creme of areas in a town, like where you'd want to flip houses, where you can profit big because people want houses in that area. That's where this building inspector was. He hated, us. I don't know how to describe it.
I think he hated everybody. I don't think he liked
but I'm just going to make
period.
this personal and just say that, Bob, he hated us more than everybody else. And still to today,
probably, I
hear people say, oh yeah, we mentioned your name because, we had the show. We mentioned your name to the building inspector and he said, oh, stay away from them. And it's just, he's just, I don't know. I can't believe he hasn't got run over by a car yet. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But you're going to face these things. And, you're going to have contractors steal money. I have 4 open lawsuits still with contractors, mostly roofers, that it just took our money and just ran. And you would think, oh my God, how can they do that? Well, they do. Well, then how can they win in the lawsuit? They don't. They lose. But then they make sure that there's never a dollar in their bank account. They make sure that their income is never reported. Like, it is the craziest thing to think that people can live like this. It's actually, when you dig into it, folks, it's sad. It's sad because some of these contractors, they have families, they have kids, and these kids have to watch and learn that this is what their father or parent did to screw people. And it's really a sad state of affairs. But
then worse is they get that money mindset of like, this is what, this is acceptable. It's okay. Right. Like, and that's even worse. It just perpetuates the problem further.
I agree. Now I want to transition into something else. So Bob had mentioned there wasn't a lot of flippers in our area. There was me and my wife, there was Bob, I would argue to say during that era, we were probably the 2 biggest flippers in Buffalo, bar none. Like, you put us together and there was nobody that even came close within half. But, it did get busier and busier. And, as that happened, things got weird, but Bob and I saw this unique opportunity, and I'll never forget. And I don't remember, I knew Bob was coaching for Fortune Builders, which was the creme de la creme of coaching. And still today, I would say Reigns is probably one of the most transparent, ethical coaching companies to ever enter and exit the real estate world, because they just did a good job. And Bob was a coach there. I was part of another company that we paid a lot of money to coach. So the thing I want to preface with that, folks, is if you're going to get into real estate, get a good mentor, get a good coach, get somebody that's ridden through the hard economic times. I don't care if it's the Great Recession, okay, or maybe the pandemic, like somebody that's failed that then overcame that. Because today it just seems like so many people are out there doing things and they just think there's no downside to any of this. And they're just, giving bad advice. Now I paid.
It's even worse than that. Like, I was on a call the other day, and the number of people that were on, they're like, yeah, I started flipping in 2021 and then 2020, and then things slowed down. And so now I'm going to coach people on my process. I was like, wait, hang on a second. You just started recently, and all of a sudden you're facing your first slowdown in a market, and now you're going to coach people on a process that's not working, because if it was working, you wouldn't need to be coaching in this way. And I just see so many of these people that they won for a short period of time, and so they think that they're great. And it's like, hey, and I just want to caution everybody, right? Like, find somebody who has, like Chris said, lived through it, who's done it, who has the track record, if they're going to be your coach. And I'm not downplaying that person can't teach you something, but just understand what you're getting yourself into if you're going to.
I couldn't agree more. We're in the longest bull run in history. Real estate is in a massive bubble across the country. Buffalo, even for the first time, I think ever, is in a bubble probably, as well. Yeah, right? It's an interesting dynamic.
It's great. It's fun, right? For us, I'm like, oh, wow, this is
crazy.
New.
It's crazy. I mean, I don't even know what to make of it. I don't know where the people are coming from, because who the hell wants to live in Buffalo? But anyway, it's just, be very cautious in who you get. Like I said, my first flip was in 2006. I almost went bankrupt in 2008 because of a development project that I did. Bob and his dad have gone through these economic cycles. We don't coach anymore, but I'm just trying to preface, like, just find somebody that has gone through it if you really want to make it through what's about to come. But let's go back to like the time when we were the all reigning champs of flipping in the Buffalo area, we actually did decide to start sharing what we knew. And we created a company together called Flip Out. Okay. Flip Out Academy was a company that was different than the other coaching. We took everything Fortune Builders and everything Zurich's and the other big coaching companies did back then, and we said, what do they lack? And it was that one-on-one, that personal touch. And not only that, literally getting in with your students, going out to the actual properties and doing the deals with them, and they would pay us, and we wouldn't partner with our students, but we would literally become almost like an extension, a consultant in their deal. I can't count how many times I was at my students' flips, teaching them, talking to their contractors, laying it all out so that they could learn firsthand. And it was a lot of fun. And Bob had a lot of skills and still does, hence his company, 3 Degree Consulting, with technology and funnels and websites, all stuff that back then, we're talking 2014, like I didn't have the slightest clue, barely could turn a computer on. But Bob knew how to do all this. So we basically came together with tons of experience and the technology that the market really needed back then, because it really was new. Technology was just starting to make its mark with funnels and everything in marketing. And that's what we did. And the company went really well for quite a while. But I don't know. Let me let you talk about it then I'll give you my take on where I think Flip Out Academy really suffered. And I think every coaching company probably faces the same headwinds that we weren't aware of.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. I mean, I think a lot of things were happening. The market was very much shifting at that point in time. And there's also, I guess my point of view is I think we kind of hit that critical mass of coaching companies. And in my opinion, like you said, a lot of them were doing it kind of not great. Like take Zurich's and Nudge, both of which have now been shut down by the FTC for bad practices. And I think it kind of muddied the waters for the people who were trying to do it the right way. And if you had the bandwidth financially and personnel wise to withstand that. I think you could have, but I think there was a lot of that. And then I also think for us, the hardest part that we faced, and this is a big thing, if you're on this podcast, you're already above and beyond most, which is mindset, right? Like I can't coach someone, no matter how much knowledge I have, experience I have, and same with Chris, or any coach for that matter. You can't coach someone who doesn't want to be coached, who's not coachable, who thinks they know it all, right? Who thinks that they are above and beyond. Oh, this work, like I know how to do this better. I know you told me not to, but I'm going to go do this. Like those kinds of people becomes hard. And a lot of areas in the States breed, and I think this is just, coming back to like those contractors, for example, breed bad mindset around stuff, and you can't fix those either. So.
Well, you already hit it. So, Flip Out, we had a really good run. We had lots of great students, and we had a lot of students, but we hit a critical mass, and a critical mass that every business will hit, where we had to grow or we had to decide what we're going to do next. And growing was very difficult because of the headwinds we were facing with bad contractors. So if we were going to grow, our model as a coaching company also included helping our students build their own contracting teams. Now, if we're all fishing in the same pond, eventually the pond gets fished out. So we got to a point where we physically couldn't find good contractors. And some of the contractors we'd kind of point our students over to, they screwed our students. So even good contractors turned bad, because all contractors, and I don't care if you're a contractor, don't be upset about what I'm going to say, they burn out. You burn a contractor out on it. Like they can only do so many houses, and then all of a sudden they try to shortcut change things. They try to make more money. They try to cut corners. I don't care if it's, a brass and an aluminum doorknob that they have sitting in their warehouse. Like that happens. Even the best contractors eventually will go that route if you're not on them. And, we were at a critical mass. We had lots of students. We had lots of houses happening, not just our flips we were doing, but our students were doing flips. I mean,
too, yeah.
We're talking about probably at any given time with all of our students, 60, 70 houses going. I just want you all to think about that, right? We were a small company. We had employees and we had project managers, but like that's still a lot. And we just couldn't provide the services that we felt a coaching company needed to provide to do what we were passionate about. And as we started doing, seeing this, our students changed, because obviously flipping got more, and this is what you were alluding to, Bob, flipping got really popular. We had just got done with our TV show and flipping was like really popular. So what we started doing is attracting people that literally thought we were just going to do their flip for them and they were just going to make all the money. And I kid you not, you guys are like, that doesn't happen. No, I swear to God, it happens. People would pay us for the coaching. They would not do much of the coaching that we did, the education programs and all the meetings that we did. They would find a house and they would buy the house and they would just think we're going to do it for them. And then when anything went wrong, a contractor didn't show up, when they were supposed to, something didn't go right, we were the ones that they held responsible. Well, that's your fault. You referred this contractor. So our referral network of contractors started being one of the biggest problems we had. We couldn't scale and maintain the controls. And this is where, the ones that got shut down by the FTC, I think went really bad, is they didn't care about that. They just pushed through and they just said, that's not my problem. They just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And unfortunately, the students lost lots of money. So we just decided not to continue on. And, Bob and I, we ended up just, parting waves, doing other things. It was amicable. I bought Bob out of the company. I still own Flip Out, but it does nothing. Literally, Flip Out owns a piece of paper called a trademark. And someday, I swear to you, that trademark on Flip Out Academy and Flip Out will be worth something, because somebody will see that I got the trademark and say, hey, we've got this huge company that wants to use the name Flip Out. Will you sell it? And that'll be the that'll be the day. I just got to wait for it. So now, Bob, you've transitioned. I know you still own a lot of rentals. I know you still do some properties, not nearly what we used to, but you've transitioned. Can we just talk about this pivot? And I witnessed this. I came out to Beverly Hills and to California with you many times and saw you pivoting and saw the struggles you were going through. So let's talk a little bit about like what forced the pivot, or why did you pivot? What that early days of the pivot were like. And now I'm not going to say you're on easy street, because you will never allow yourself to be on easy street, but now you're comfortable. This business is doing really well. Like, can we just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the things, and we didn't get too much into this, but while we were building our flipping business, I lived in Los Angeles. So I was 3,000 miles away. Now, for most of you guys right now, you might go, okay, big deal. But you got to imagine this is back, I moved to Los Angeles 2010. So, Dropbox had just come out. Like being able to share files across the internet was like a new idea. Skype was still the only video chat. I don't even know if we had FaceTime yet at that point in time. Right. And so it just created a very, very different reality. And so I got good at digital marketing. That's how I helped our company. So to date, actually, even though agents early on were our biggest piece, if we look back now, about 40% of all of our deals came from digital marketing through SEO efforts, things with our website, stuff like that. And so I got very good at that. And what I found is that because I'm a techie, I come from a tech background. I went to Rochester Institute of Technology. So I have a lot of that in my space. This kind of spoke to me more. And I said, well, I still like real estate, but I also like this. So how do I make that happen? And that's where the company I have now, which is 3 Degrees Consulting, which is a digital marketing agency for real estate investors, kind of comes in. And we do other things besides real estate, but the majority of what we do is in real estate. And I just found that, hey, like this was more fun, one. Number two, for me, I've always traveled a lot. And so this offers me the opportunity to actually, live remotely and be nomadic. So in fact, I am at this point in time today, I am on month 16 of being 100% nomadic in a row. I had 1 year I was in Austin, and then I had about 8 months during the pandemic, which is actually the best time to travel ever. I still can't believe it. I was scoring round trip flights across the country for under $100.
And you were like one of like 20 on the plane.
Yep. It was everyone was like mind blown. I was like, it was great. But so I wanted, more location freedom to be able to travel around and do that. So I saw that. And no, it's definitely not been easy. Pandemic hit us actually pretty hard. We had just kind of picked up speed before, and then kind of found ourselves going, oh crap, now what? And have kind of come back out through that other side. And I feel like we've really honed in on our niche. And I think they did something that a lot of people don't talk about either, which is, when you start a business, you'll kind of do anything, right? If it's within the world of what you do, like I'll take any house. I don't care if it's a foreclosure, it's a fire damage, you'll take anything. But as you kind of figure out what you're good at and where your strengths lie, you narrow down. And that's kind of where we're at now. And it's an exciting time for us anyways, because it's like, hey, we've got to the point where, we've got money coming in, we've got a business, we've got some team members. Actually, we're just about to hire another full-time person right now. And it's like, this is where that goes, but it's taken years of just grind, like straight up grind, to get there. And but I wouldn't change any of it. I'm what they call unemployable. Getting a job just doesn't work for me.
It's kind of like staying in one place just doesn't work for you, but to each their own. And you're very good at it. You're one of the best nomadics I've ever met, and I think you might be the only one that I know today, but I've met many over my years. And I've watched you build 3 Degrees, and I've seen you speak on it. It is such a unique platform you've created. I'm sure it's not the only one that does what it does, but the fact that you are so ingrained in helping your clients do it is really unique. And I know we've had discussions about you helping us with things, which, I still always, like, every time I talk to you, I'm like, oh, I need you to help us do this stuff. But specifically, can we just dive in real quick? Because I think this is really important. We just talked about a lot of failures in a lot of different realms and a lot of different changes. But, how now with your company, like, what are the biggest things that you think you can help this audience with? Like, what would be the key 3 things that you could provide for everybody that's listening to this podcast?
Yeah. So the 3 things. Number one, you need a great website, especially if you're a real estate investor. We've got some very low price options. So if you're brand new and you don't, because I get it, like, right, it takes a lot of money to get a business off the ground. But we can help you there. Look great online. It's never been more important, especially post pandemic. Like, it's never been more important to have a credible, well-designed website for your business. If you don't, I guarantee you, while you still might make money, you're leaving a ton on the table, because people just go, oh, you must not be legit because your website doesn't reflect who we thought you were. That's number one. Number two is, and this is kind of what we did a lot for with FlipOut too, is just follow up with email marketing, text marketing, all of that. So we actually, we found a great technology, took that technology as a CRM, which does all that stuff and a whole lot more. And then basically stacked on a bunch of real estate aspects and a few others on there just to make that work easier. and help you get out there. But again, it can kind of work for any business. I think the most important part is, again, post-pandemic, it's never been more important to email your people, to text them, to get in touch with them in that capacity. Follow-up is critical. And then last is, if you want to get ranked on Google, we've got a great team behind us now that's just really dialed in on that. In fact, I was just reviewing the report for one of our clients down in Savannah, and we increased his traffic 153% in 1 month. Took him from, like, I don't know, it was like 1,200 to 3,600 or something like that uniques a month, which is great. And that's not, obviously, let's quantify asterisk. That's not going to be true for everybody. But it's a lot of fun to be able to look at someone and say, okay, great, we can do this for you and help you get more people to your site.
I think let me reverse engineer that. I want everybody to think about that. Like, where do you get your information? If you need something, you go to Google and you Google it, right? And what does it do? It brings up a website. Well, how do you think that person that when you Google just a general thing, person to fix my car, person to, epoxy my garage floor, why do you think that person showed up first, second, or on the first page? It's because of what Bob just talked about. It's critical. You don't want to be page 6, 7. Nobody's going to find you. You might have spent 50 grand on your website. Nobody's going to find you. So, like, reverse engineering that, like the Google, and Google's going nowhere. No one can compete with Google. Let's be honest. And people are like, oh, AI is going to take over Google. Google will control AI eventually.
They'll buy it if they can't build it.
Yeah, exactly. They'll just buy it. They can't. We don't need to go how much money they got. Just look at their stock and their market cap. So you got that, which gets people to your site. But then, after that, you need a good site. How many of you have ever gone to a website and you see it and you're just like, dude, who built this? Did they just literally go on and build their own site? I avoid those because, like, if they can't spend the effort to build a nice site that's easy to navigate and shows what I want, like, I don't want them coming out and doing any work for me. So you got to have the good site. And then after somebody comes to your site, maybe clicks to contact you or browsing, like, you need some way to communicate to them. What way do all of you communicate nowadays? It's not the same way you used to. Are you just driving over to the person's business? The pandemic pretty much changed the way we do business. It's all done through email, it's done through Zoom, and it's done through texting. I can't even begin to tell you, all of you, you all know this, you communicate through text, even business. So when somebody, you're going to go to an event or something, you want a text reminder. That's all the main things. Bob, I just guessed at the 3 things, but you nailed it. Like, those are the 3 most critical things every business, I don't care if it's real estate, I don't care if it's in the money space, every business needs all 3 of those boxed up. And if you folks watching this think you can do it yourself, good luck. You're going to be calling Bob later saying, boy, I shoulda, I coulda, I woulda. These are the critical things. This is what Bob did at FlipOut. This is why FlipOut was successful. He did all these things way back then, but he didn't have the CRM thing, because now they get all the data in, and then that data drives the results. Like that we didn't have. I think, we had a CRM back then, didn't we?
Yep. I think you guys are actually still using the same one for right now, which, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it necessarily.
Oh, it's great.
There's so much more, and there's so much more happening now. It's crazy too, right? Like, we're now actually able to capture people who come to your website, even if they don't opt in, drop in direct mail to them, start marketing to them that way. There's a lot of cool things happening, and by the way, a lot's going to change too. Like, we don't have time to get into all of it, but the next 12 to 24 months, everything we thought we knew about internet marketing is going to change, because Google and Apple have decided to shake up the whole industry.
Oh man, I'm always up for a good challenge, but I always got somebody in my corner, and that's you, Bob. So folks, as we wrap this up, I hope you enjoyed this. When we were talking, offline, we were talking like, let's not just talk about the good stuff and all that. Let's talk about the suffering and all the failures and all the pivots we've had to make throughout the last decade of our lives, a little over that. And because that's where some of you are. And if you're not there yet, you're going to probably be there. You're going to have these kind of failures, these kind of pivots, and you're going to have to make hard decisions. But the biggest thing you can see from this story is the one thing Bob did is he stayed consistent and persistent. He never gave up. He easily could have gave up after that first $40,000 loss. And I bet you probably 90+% of the people would have just stopped right there and been like, this isn't for me, found a way to work the next 10 years and pay off that debt. He said, nope. I'm going to do this right. I learned so much by failing. I'm going to go and succeed. And he did, and succeeded again and again, hundreds of times, folks. That's your path too, if you leap. Don't let somebody tell you can't do something. Don't let somebody you shouldn't do something. You're in control of your dream and your destiny. And if you follow somebody else telling you not to do something, I just want you to remember you're complying and following somebody's failed dream. Bob, his father, myself, we did not. And because of that, we're successful in whatever realm you consider success. But I also want you to preface that you must get these 3 basic principles under control. And those are the 3 things Bob said. Got to have the good website. You got to have the Google rankings, and you also have to have the method to communicate with your clients. And that's only going to get better or more challenging. So it's up to you, folks. I would just say get a hold of Bob. Bob, how would they get a hold of you and learn more about this?
Yeah, best way is just reach out to me. Go to go3DC. So go 3 degrees consulting, go3dc.com/Bob McIntosh. And my last name is no A. It's just MCINTOSH. On that page, you'll find all my social. You'll be able to download my contact card, which has my cell, my email, my work phone, everything there. So just reach out to me, shoot me a text, shoot me an email, shoot me a message, whatever you want to. And the thing I always say is like, hey, let's just chat. Let's talk. Let's see if it's a good fit. If it's a great fit, then we'll move forward. If not, no big deal.
Well, folks, from me to you, I vouch for this man. We've had a lot of business dealings. I mean, we've done real estate together. We've done flip out together, and we will continue to do business together. So if that means anything, I would suggest doing that. We'll put that link in the description, folks. With that being said, I'm going to leave you with this as we wrap this episode up. Remember, I said it in the beginning, and I want to preface it again. It's not the knowledge. It's not the stories. It's not what you just learned. It's how you actually apply this information. It's how you use this to get further and get better at what you're doing. So please do yourself a favor and make me proud by applying at least one thing you learned here today. And with that being said, folks, thanks for joining us for another episode. We'll see you next time.